Well, welcome to the English Bubble. We're doing something new again. The first releases from the estate called Everflyht. So they're very near Ditchling, which you might remember for another estate. And funnily enough, the winemaker had all his experience at Ridgeview as well. So it's really interesting here because these are their first ever releases straight out of the ground. Richard, I think you mentioned you haven't tasted these before.
I've never tasted Everflyht before. I'm aware of the estate because I go down to Ditchling from time to time and people talk.
Right.
And so I'm aware of the name, but I've never tried them. And it is one of the extraordinary things about English sparkling wine that this estate was only founded in 2015.
Right.
So the vines went into the ground in 2015. We're tasting a blend here, which is made up of 2018 and 2019. So this is the first wine they've ever made.
Yes.
And it is a constant source of amazement to me, the quality of sparkling wine England is producing from extraordinarily young vines. And it may be that was always the case with sparkling wines. Maybe it was always true of champagne as well, but I'm not convinced. I think it is a combination of propitious terroir and increasingly well-trained winemakers,
Right.
and viticulturalists who can manage to produce wines of this quality from very young vines. Who's to say this is their first vintage? I haven't tried it yet, so I'm making a lot of assumptions here.
So I came across the wines in a blind tasting last summer. There was a rosé or Saignee rosé blind tasting of English, organised by Douglas Blyde. I went along, so I didn't know what I was tasting, and this rosé, which we're going to taste second, performed really well in the blind tasting. So we ended up listing them. Now I haven't tasted these for a while. So the first one, which is a blend of 18, there's a little bit of reserve wine from 18, 24%, so it's predominantly 19. And it's a real mix of grapes, so Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are both 47, and then a little touch, 6% of Meunier. Now how's it tasting, Richard?
It's really interesting. What's coming through to me, tasting it, is actually, at this stage, and it could be just this stage, is some of the oak. Because I know they've used a mixture of stainless steel, old oak and new oak in this. And on the palate, I think that does come through. This is bold. This is a bold style of sparkling wine. The aromatics are bold, the flavour, massive flavour.
So 14% is actually barrel fermented, so just, almost call that a dash.
Yeah. So
and
it's not what you think when you taste it.
It's not the white fruit that's, the Chardonnay isn't dominating on the aromatics, is it?
No, it's not.
It's classic peach, it's classic.
I suppose what I quite like about the aromas is that they're a little bit Burgundian to me. And in the sense that very often when you're drinking Burgundy, you're not necessarily thinking, oh, this smells of Chardonnay. There's much more to it than just a grape variety. And that's what I feel when I'm smelling and tasting this.
Wow.
It's no particular grape that comes through. It's the combination of grapes and the way they've made it. And possibly the precociousness of a first vintage, because they all often talk about that, don't they?
Yes.
That the first vintage, the first grapes you get from vines can be precocious, can give this a certain intensity of flavour.
And there's an amazing energy. When you taste it,
it's not holding back.
The palates, the aromatics are a little bit, definitely red fruit led. The palate really is lively, isn't it? I love that. There's a bit of oak, there's a bit of the freshness in there, and there's just, maybe it is a bit precocious actually, Richard.
A lot of flavour, very generous, satisfying. I mean, it's extraordinary. What amazes me for a first vintage is just how well balanced it is. We know from the past that in England it's not easy to balance the dosage and the acidity. It's not a simple equation, and yet neither appears out of balance here.
Yes.
I think they've judged it beautifully. Extraordinary for a first vintage.
No, I think there's lots of details in here. So there's the nice thing is with new estates is they provide us with lots of technical information, and so all the clones are listed here, and it's really quite interesting. There's I can't quite describe the palate, and the fruit on it. There's just some lovely fruit.
There is fruit. As I was saying earlier, I can't describe a specific fruit character to it either.
Because the Chardonnay is lost in the breadth of the palate.
Yeah.
And often Chardonnay is the one thing I really, you pick up on. It's usually so dominant.
I mean, if pressed,
yes,
I would talk in terms of honey, roasted nuts.
Right.
A sort of slightly, roasted nuts character.
I thought it was fabulous when I tasted it last summer, and I think it's evolving. Beautifully.
I can certainly understand why you're impressed. I'm impressed too. Full of flavour, just a really generous, satisfying glass of sparkling wine.
Now, I don't normally get too hung up on pricing, but how much do you think that is, Richard?
That is a very good question.
We're playing a little game.
Okay. With pricing or with the different glasses?
I don't know.
Both.
Yeah.
How much do I think it is? 35 to 40?
It's actually under £30.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
So
it's a lot of wine there.
I think there's a tremendous amount of wine. So congratulations to the team for doing a great job.
It's very good.
So I came across the estate in this blind tasting of Saignee Rosé, which is now what we have in front of us. So 2019. Richard, in terms of how this is made, this is obviously a little bit of skin contact, and I think it's something like 18 hours if I remember right. I was just going to see if they tell me, but they don't. So, but typically this would just be a very short period, wouldn't it?
Well, this is about 12 hours.
12 hours.
I know, I did a tiny bit of research.
Ah.
On the Finest Bubble website, in case you're wondering, actually.
Okay. Good source of information.
Wonderful source of information. So, relatively short maceration, 12 hours. What I find interesting in these two glasses, and I hadn't noticed this before, is I actually prefer the colour, which I know is a weird thing to say.
No, I agree with you.
In this glass, it brings out the reddishness of the colour better, whereas in this glass it's slightly more, it's the orange character that comes through. I love the red colour that comes from this, which I wasn't expecting.
So it's 60% Pinot Noir and 40% Meunier. It's a really weird thing to say, Richard. I haven't tasted it. In the bigger glass, it's like there's Chardonnay in there that's coming forward. It's very different how the fruit expression.
Absolutely.
Because this is very much strawberry and.
This is very strawberry, and to be honest, it's very strawberry on the palate, very red fruit on the palate as well. Really fruity. Whereas in this glass, somehow there's a coolness to the aromatics. This glass brings out a ripeness and a maturity of the grapes, whereas this glass, on the aroma at least, emphasises a cooler side of the aromatic.
It's sort of, there's even some black currantiness.
Yeah.
In the layman's, these are the Grand Champagne glasses. I was hoping there was going to be a preference here. So some interesting points which we haven't mentioned is soils of the estate. So, I believe there's chalk lower down.
I think where they are near Ditchling,
right,
you'd have thought there has to be a chalk subsoil.
Yes. Somewhere
nearby. There may well be clay on top, but in most of that area they have a chalk subsoil. The fruit quality is terrific. I can see why this stood out at a tasting, a little bit like the cuvee we tried just now. Really would stand out because of that intensity of fruit flavour.
Right.
It's fascinating that just a 12-hour Saignee can give that wonderfully expressive red fruit character that we're picking up here.
Now this was, so the wines here, they were made and then aged in old Burgundy barrels. So, they've gone to lots lots of trouble with this.
I cannot get over the ripeness of the fruit. This is the vintage, the Saignee is 2018, isn't it?
19.
So it's 19, sorry. But there's an amazing ripeness of fruit to it. Very Pinot in character.
So there's something really interesting here. This seems to bring in a lightness of style.
Mm-hmm.
This almost seems to concentrate the dark fruit.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
I find it, in this glass, I find it almost jammy.
It is jammy.
On the
Yes,
middle
a real
palate.
dark fruit.
Whereas this glass, both aromatically and on the palate, it seems to bring out a little bit more coolness and freshness.
Exaggerate
the character.
I think it sort of works better in this glass.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
It almost is.
I agree.
It's almost a little bit heavy. I do get that jamminess now you've mentioned. That was probably what I couldn't.
Impressive wine.
Delicious wine.
Wow. Well done, Everflyht.
Well, this is a bit tricky now, Richard, because we've got 3 glasses. So 2 rosés. And the fascinating thing about glassware is you can't always predict what's going to perform in which glass. And somehow that style for me works in the bigger the glass. And it has a more lightness, it has a more delicate sort of style to it.
Yeah.
Which one would you eat toast with?
Of these 3, I would go for the Rosé de Saignee in this. I am finding I'm becoming an increasing fan of Rosé de Saignee from England.
Right.
Seems to be, you attended that tasting that Douglas organised. It seems to me there's a bit of momentum there.
Okay, so top tip, watch out for these just beautifully made Rosé de Saignees, which in this case is beautifully elegant. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Cheers.
And cheers, everybody.